shows or join the team at sport-social.co.uk.
Hello, welcome back to game week 4 of the FPL Masterclass. Welcome back. It is great to be back, Rob. Obviously, we've had the international break. Manchester United have signed, and I know a lot of FPL fans are very excited about Cristiano Ronaldo, who is a £12.5 billion asset. And I think a lot of people have rushed to bring him in, Rob, but we're going to actually talk about, should we actually be breaking the bank for Cristiano Ronaldo? Because there are suggestions. No secrets here. There are suggestions. And we'll go for it today, and we'll have a look at some of the stats. And maybe it's a bit premature to be bringing him in. But welcome back, Rob, and welcome back to everyone here. It's great to be back. And how are you feeling for this game week?
Feeling good. Been a good first few game weeks for me in terms of not panicking, not feeling that, quite often in that opening 1 or 2 game weeks, stuff happens and you think, oh, you get injuries, you get players out of form. We're not quite sure what to do. And of course, then you trigger the wild card. And I always say that you can use that wild card in that first 6 weeks. That's kind of the prudent way to do it. But I'm not there at the moment. So that's not a bad thing for me. But I'll explain, obviously, what our team here for the FPL Masterclass did last week, the kind of structure of it. We're going to talk about Ronaldo this week. Obviously, a huge differential to come back, but with a big price. So that's a choice for managers of FPL. You have to kind of choose whether you stay purely premium and then lots and lots of budget, or whether you mix it up. And if that helps, we already know that lots of United fans have got trigger fingers, itchy. Here we go. Ronaldo's back. I've got to have him in my team. And we're going to answer today whether you really do need him in your team for game week 4.
Well, I think, Rob, we crunched the numbers, didn't we? And we saw that if you're following our teams, I did not follow our teams, but if I was, you'd be sitting in the top 5%. So obviously, we are giving some good tips. Some of them I'm not taking, some of them you're not taking, some of them we are. But, let's start with reviewing game week 4, because I think that we could talk about Ronaldo forever. And I'm just going to get this up on the screen here. So this is actually your team from game week 3.
Yep.
Game week 3, sorry. And we're having a look at it over here, Rob, and we're going to run through it. So you have a look at it, your defense, really. I mean, you did pretty well considering there were a lot of goals, wasn't there? And you saw Cancelo, especially, who did fantastic. You look at the City triumvirate that you've got there of Gundogan, Torres, Cancelo. They're probably the 3 players at City that you do want in your team at the moment. And they all gave you returns. You're looking at Gundogan, he finally got a goal. I actually kept him in. I was going to take him out, but I kept him in. And your punt at the beginning of the season, Ferran Torres, was fantastic. Look at him. I believe he got a hat-trick, didn't he? So, and then you're looking at the front as well. We both captained Antonio. I think that was a great shout. I'm really pleased I hit the captaincy correct, because it's been a bit of a struggle for me over probably a year, to be honest. It's been a bit of one that I'm not getting right at the moment. And then, you picked up a few points here with Danny Ings. But let's have a chat about this. What stands out to you here? Because you did really well. Look, you're in the top 50,000 for that game week.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned, kind of playing FPL for all of these years now, a decade or so, is that balance beats premium. So what do I mean by that? Well, we all want the best players who've got the highest values in our team. But how do you fit them in without losing points elsewhere? So I think this week, my team from game week 3 hit the sweet spot, 83 points. Highest, I think the whole total there, it says, for the week was 119. So I was about 30 odd points off that. Game week ranked 50,000th, which is very, very good. It's kind of top 1%. But the average was around 54 points. So why was the average 54 points, and how did we get 83 this week? Well, it's the balance between defense, midfield, and attack. I had Schmeichel in goal this week, but I've kind of switched him in and out with Sanchez, and that's kind of hit or miss, really, just kind of depending on who the opponent is. But looking at my defense, Cresswell always takes set pieces. Cancelo basically plays everywhere except at the back, so you can play him. But then when you look at my midfield and my attack, I feel like my attack is balanced between premium and kind of top end strikers. People are going to still score goals. So, Antonio's been amazing. in the opening weeks. He's just carrying on really from last season. Danny Ings is a goal machine wherever he goes. He's either going to get goals and assists. Now he's obviously at Aston Villa. And unfortunately, my big pick, who was the big failure of the week, was Romelu Lukaku. No problems with that. And we'll talk a little bit more about Lukaku when we talk about Ronaldo in the next segment. But in midfield, you know, we talked about Ferran Torres, and this is why I've had my eye on him from day one, because watching all of Manchester City's pre-season work for my work as a journalist, Torres has played as the central fulcrum through the middle of the attack. So you know he's going to be essentially City's number 9. So he's a midfielder who plays up front. That's valuable in FPL. It's a bit like Salah being a midfielder, but we know essentially he's an attacker. Gundogan, will he play? Will he not play? Kind of depends on Kevin De Bruyne's fitness. What do we know? Kevin De Bruyne is not fit. So what do we do? I've kept him. But yes, those 3 players from Manchester City are the hub of my team at the moment. That might change. You know, might be someone else that I want to bring in. I might look at De Bruyne in weeks to come. We now know that City will not buy a striker, and I think that's really important for FPL. So Torres is going to get more minutes. And there's also the problem at the moment. We'll talk about the Brazilian issues for the Brazilian team this week, that Gabriel Jesus probably won't play this week, which means Torres is almost definitely going to play. So these are the things that I consider when I look forward. And I'm not making a substitute this week, which is really to roll over my substitutes. I have 1 in the bank, so I'm looking for 2. And that will allow me to kind of review what other premium options who are coming up this week, who might have signed for Manchester United, does in his first week. Because even if you miss the first week and Ronaldo has a big game week, you've not really lost a lot if he's going to be doing it every single week. It's better to do that, conserve your transfers, and find a way into the next game week without losing points.
Yeah, that's very key, Rob. Having those 2 transfers, especially this season where there are a lot of good premium options, but there are also a lot of, you know, sort of mid-range options as well. You're looking there at Torres, you're looking at Mason Greenwood. We'll talk about Mason Greenwood later, because he's another one that has been playing as a striker, and he's got 3 and 3. So, you know, he is giving great returns at the moment. And even Jota as well. Jota's going to be playing up front. We'll talk about those 2 players in more detail later. But I do want to talk about Antonio quickly before we move on to the man himself, Cristiano Ronaldo. And we're going to talk about Antonio because, well, he's in fantastic form. We know that. But he's also just made, you know, sort of a 10K mile journey for the internationals. He's now playing for Jamaica. So how's that going to impact him? Because, you know, I know sometimes players overlook this. I think he is probably West Ham's first choice pick for most people, isn't he? Let's be honest. Right now, I think he's one of the most most highly owned players. They have bought another striker as well. I mean, could there be an option that Antonio might see the bench, you know, just for this game because of the fact that, you know, there might be a little bit of, you know, just sort of travel, wear and tear?
100%. And this is why I always advise FPL players to watch the press conferences, because David Moyes will let you know one way or the other. You know, if he's leaning towards, well, Antonio's turned up for training, he's a bit tired. You know, it's a 10,000 mile trip, which is what he made to go and make his debut for Jamaica. You know, it's time to maybe pull him out the firing line just for a week or use him from the bench. Now, if he is on the bench, not too much of an issue. Still might mean that he comes on for half an hour and scores you a couple of goals and you're happy. But you've got to kind of think long term here. So would I take Antonio out my team right this moment? No, but there is a question mark over his head. And then you need to kind of think about your own budgets and balance, and about whether you do go for Ronaldo. Ronaldo's come back into the league, obviously, as a striker. That's important. And then you have to decide about Romelu Lukaku. So we'll talk about Lukaku in the next segment as well, because that's kind of ties in with Ronaldo. But with the rest of my team there, again, it's just about balance. And I do try and look at the international window and think to myself, well, when the internationals are on, you know, who plays, who hasn't, who's actually had that rest for a week. You know, and that's pivotal, I think, when you're going forward. I think you need players who are a little bit fresher. So that's always something for people to muse over. But let's see what the press conferences say on Friday first.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And let's move on now to Cristiano Ronaldo, because I think, you know, let's look at the fixtures actually first, because I think this is key before we move on to Ronaldo. I'm going to link this to Ronaldo, Rob, because Manchester United are playing Newcastle, and it looks like Manchester United probably have one of the easiest fixtures, I think, this week. You know, you're looking at Ronaldo's record as well against Newcastle. I believe it's 8 goals, isn't it, in his last 3? So, he scored a lot of goals against Newcastle. We're looking at some of these fixtures here. You're seeing Arsenal against Norwich. Are there any Arsenal players that you're thinking about? I know they're bottom of the table and they're doing extremely poor at the moment. But when you have a look at it, you're thinking possibly, could Arsenal hit some form? They have got some good forward players.
The only people who are going to be gambling on Arsenal players on FPL are Arsenal fans. So there's no doubt that the Norwich fixture sets you up nicely. So you could go there and think there's you could look at someone like Aubameyang, but he's a top priced option. I don't even know if he's available actually for this game week, but we would see. And Arsenal have got good players. That's not really the debate. The debate is this Arsenal team performing? And of course we know that is no, they're not. So would I waste any of my transfers on Arsenal people this week, any Arsenal players? No, because there's just better options. And that's what it comes down to. It's only Arsenal fans who would gamble on this. And I don't see anyone in the ranks in terms of Arsenal's squad. The only player I might kind of lean towards is someone like Smith Rowe. Really good budget option. And he could set on fire. He could kind of have 10 games where he scores you 3 or 4 goals, gets you a couple of assists. And as a bench option, might be quite tasty for you. But at the moment, this is a subjective slide here that we're using about what's the best fixtures. And as you kind of go through it, you can see that there's lots of form teams that have got opportunities this week. When you look on the left-hand side, Arsenal at the top of this, and Arsenal are not a form team. So that, for me, would immediately discount them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You're seeing a few other teams here, Rob. Brighton have been in great form. They're playing a good Brentford side or a decent Brentford side. Wolves have been fantastic, and we'll talk about some of their options later because Wolves are a side who are, sitting at the top of the attacking sort of creativity in terms of shots as a side. They've also been very good defensively. They just can't really get a point at the moment, but they will. I mean, look, a season as long as 38 games, they will be good value for money. They will get, those points and those wins that they need. But let's move on to Cristiano Ronaldo. Of course, that's why we're here. The Ronaldo return. And obviously, I'm very, very happy about it. And I know a lot of people have brought in Ronaldo already, which is a little bit of a surprise for me, to be honest, Rob. And that's me as someone who's a massive Ronaldo fan. I'm very surprised because it's a very sort of nostalgic view. I think it's a big risk. I think that someone like Bruno and Salah, for me, I've got Bruno and Salah on my team, and I think I'm going to keep both of them for now because I need to see what's going to happen. Ronaldo coming into league. Look, he could go and score a hat-trick against Newcastle. But I feel like the risk is quite big for him. He hasn't played in the league for nearly 12 years. And then we're having a look at some of his points here. And from 06 to 09 is where we saw, Ronaldo completely explode. You saw in 06, 07, 17 goals and 16 assists. Then the season later, 07, 08, obviously was a fantastic season for Manchester United and 31 goals in the Premier League. He absolutely flew. He became the best player in the world. And then, the season later was a bit of a drop for him, and obviously he wanted to leave. 18 goals and 6 assists. I'm just thinking about him this season, Rob, and a lot of people have asked me how many goals do I think Ronaldo is going to get. I think Ronaldo is going to hit close to 20 goals this season, but he's going to be a different player, isn't he, to the one that we saw in 07 or 08.
Totally. Like, we use these slides because they're representative of what he did in the league before for FPL. This is an FPL show, not a Premier League show. But they do kind of correlate. So when you look at those numbers there, it was a different time in Ronaldo's career. It doesn't mean that Ronaldo will have problems this year scoring goals or getting assists or any of that. It's about value. It's about how you put your teams together. So one of the things that I said on the first game week for FPL was do not pick your teams with this, your heart. Pick it with this, your brain. Now, there is value to say that Cristiano Ronaldo will score you lots of goals this year. So your brain says, pick him, but I'm not picking him yet because it's not because he might fail. It's because other players are still in a better category to perform versus their budgetary value. People might be falling asleep at this moment, but they might be looking at that and thinking, oh, I'm just going Ronaldo because I want Ronaldo to score a hat-trick, and he might well score a hat-trick, and then you'll be very happy and you've got the points.
Rob, but just to interject, do you think he's going to start? Because I think that's a great place to start.
Personally, I think he will start, and it's because there's been a debate this week about whether Ole will do an Ole and kind of put him on the bench for a week or two and break him in, and there is always that option, and it would not surprise me if Ole did do that. But the fact that he's been training with United all week because obviously he didn't have that extra commitment with the internationals because he got suspended, that kind of makes me lean towards the fact that he will probably start the game and play 70 or 80 minutes as opposed to sitting on the bench and playing 20 or 30. I think United, from a marketing point of view, want to put Ronaldo on a football pitch. They want to win the Premier League that day. When they put him out on Saturday, they win the Premier League that day. They get every Instagram like, every kind of notion towards whether Manchester United could be champions again. All of the conversation goes towards them. So they know that putting Ronaldo on a football pitch gives you all of that. So I think United fans can buy Ronaldo for FPL, safe in the knowledge probably that he will start, but it's still just a kind of little bit of a guessing game until we hear what Ole says in his press conference. But I just think with Ronaldo, be careful, because if United do use him as a 36-year-old striker and they use him and rotate him with Cavani, there's every chance that if Cavani's on form in the next 6 weeks, that Ronaldo plays less minutes and gets you less points. And that's what this game is about. It's about getting you points. So I would just sit on it with Ronaldo. Just wait, be patient. At 12.5 million, he's a big premium buy. He will affect at least 2 or 3 other players in your team, and that's a problem. So you have to think like that. I know lots of United fans had fired that trigger because they can't resist it, but that's part of this game, isn't it? It's about knowing when to do it and when not to do it. And we're still very early in the calendar. So my advice at the moment is just wait.
Rob, I do want to bring up some good questions here. There's one here sort of saying, we'll talk about wildcards as well, because I think let's bring it into this segment, because it's something that I've been toying with. So Franklin's got a question or a comment here saying, I'm still reluctant to use my wildcard and decide to take a negative 4 points to bring in Torres. Should I use my wildcard? I want to save it for when I know which role and how we'll play. Now, Franklin, I've been sitting here and I've had the same issues. I was talking to Rob off air. I usually go for a 2-keeper strategy. And I say I usually do it. Last year was the first year I'd done it, and it worked really well for me. And I think for me at the moment, I've got both keepers out. Martinez is out, and Foster's injured, and then Foster's obviously not first choice for Watford. I'm looking at my team as well, and I've got a defense that's not really performing. Rob, I'm looking at it now. I've got Shaw, Kufal, Tsimikas. Tsimikas probably won't play as much now. Target, and I've got Hoover as the option on the bench. Then I've got doubled up on Salah and Fernandes. So even if I want to bring Ronaldo in, I'll have to lose 4 points, essentially. And then if I want to bring in a goalkeeper, which I'll need to do, that's -8. So I'm in a sort of predicament. Should I be using it? Should I not? I think I'm going to hold off for the moment. I think the team there's some nice fixtures here. Salah's got some good fixtures. Gundogan's doing quite well. I might bring in Ferran Torres, so I might take the 4-point hit. I've got Dallas and Benrahma. Benrahma's in good form. And then I've got Ings, Antonio, and Tony. Put Tony on the bench and he scored. But is it too early, Rob? We're in game week 4. Should we be looking at maybe game week 6 to be considering the wild card?
It's not too early if you look at your team and it's a disaster. So like you just read out your team there, which is quite interesting, Haider, because you like to be quite secretive. I know you don't like normally giving your team to the world, and I understand that because I'm the same. But I think when you look at the team that you just read out, it's not actually that bad in terms of form. So like you kind of said there, so-and-so is not performing all this. You said Luke Shaw there. Luke Shaw hasn't really given any returns yet. But say Ronaldo plays and Luke Shaw gets gets down the left and gets the ball in the box, and Ronaldo scores a hat-trick and he gets 3 assists. Suddenly you're happy with Luke Shaw. Just be prudent with the wild card. So I always say that if you feel things are not going your way within the first 6 weeks, definitely use your wild card. But it's more about playing off options at the moment. So talking about Ronaldo and wild cards, I think the 2 players to really consider at the moment about what you do with them or if they're in your team is Romelu Lukaku and Ferran Torres. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about those 2 players. I think that's the key to your wild card at the moment. The only way I would use a wild card is if I had more than, say, 6 or 7 players misperforming by a significant margin. So like I'm expecting to get me returns every week and they get me 1s and 2s. They're not playing games. They're on the subs bench. They are kind of regulars who are out of form. Those are the things that would make me use my wild card right now. Now, there will be people like that. Do it numerically. If your team in the 8 million players of FPL, say you're outside the top 1 million, and that's still like a big chunk. You're still like only the top 10% or so, top 8%, then consider it, because that's what the game is about. The game's about winning. Yeah, get to the end of the game and win.
I'm sitting, in the top 2 million 2.6 million.
Yes, so I think you're on the cusp. So if you're in that 1 to 2 million bracket and you can feel that your original picks are not working, then you need to go back to the drawing board and the strategy. And a lot of people will panic with that and they'll go, I need to change multiple players. Now, one of the things also I said at the start of this series that we're doing is that don't burn points. So to bring in Ferran Torres, that's cool. And you were saying, I'm going to lose 4 points for that. Don't do it. Do it when you need to do it, when you feel you need to, or use your wild card so you're not burning points. It's too early to burn points. And this is the point where players do it. And then when they lose their leagues by 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 points at the end of the season, they've forgotten that they burnt 50 points in the first 6 game weeks because they just got a bit jittery. Don't get jittery. Take our advice, follow some of our tips, mold around them. You don't need to kind of listen to me and take everything that comes out of my mouth as gospel, but listen to the stats and why it's prudent to go and get certain players. We're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo here, but there are other United players who might outperform him significantly this year. It could be young players like Greenwood. Rashford's on his way back. It could be Rashford. It could well be Bruno Fernandes carrying on what he's done before. It could be a defender. You might see someone like Varane picking up man of the match performances and getting the odd goal. And he obviously got an assist last week as well. There are other ways of winning this game, winning FPL. But you've got to also kind of look at the differentials. And there's plenty of options out there, certainly in the striking department when we're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, 100%, Rob. There's a question here from Sam, sort of asking, Pogba was excellent in the advanced positions. As United fans, when we do talk about Manchester United, we have both said we want Paul Pogba further forward from a Man United point of view. From an FPL point of view, he hit 5 assists in his first 2 games. So you're looking at him now, but he is probably going to drop back into the pivot. So, the question is, should people be selling him and should they be going for someone like Mason Greenwood, or someone maybe a bit more expensive?
I think the value in Pogba is when Pogba plays in the front 4 at Manchester United. So that's what he's been doing. You said he's probably going to drop back into the pivot. I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, Fred will be on international duty, which means he'll probably be ruled out of Manchester United's next game. Scott McTominay has obviously been injured. So that's a problem. There's no reason why Ole Gunnar Solskjaer doesn't go with Donny van der Beek and Nemanja Matic. As his double pivot. That allows him to keep Pogba up the other end of the pitch. And I think that he will feel that he wants to keep Paul Pogba as close to Cristiano Ronaldo as possible. So again,
that combination, Rob, we could be saying time and time again this season.
Well, there we go.
But the thing is, you look at Ronaldo as well. Paul Pogba, I think where he excels, obviously, is picking up, a bit of space and being able to play those balls. And I think Ronaldo is smart enough to make that movement. I think that could be a great little combination.
Look, great players can make great play, so the idea is that once they train together and they have that moment together and they find a way, is that it benefits you on the football pitch, beneficial for Manchester United, but also beneficial for FPL players. So this is why I would say now, obviously there with the question that was asked, I wouldn't burn Paul Pogba today because of something future proof, something that is like, will he end up playing in the double pivot? Well, yes, he will play in the double pivot, but at some point. But I wouldn't make my decisions on stuff that I don't know about. I'm looking at strategy within the game of the physics of the game and the mathematics of the game, because that's what FPL comes down to. And then you can kind of get the eye test to help you along.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, look, we brought up Ronaldo's heat map. Rob, is this from last season, I believe? Or
this is his Juventus heat map over the time that he was at the club. Yeah. So, we used this in one of our previous shows. We thought we'd bring it up again for this one. Obviously, we're doing a Ronaldo-centric show today to decide whether players should buy him or not. And what this shows really is that Ronaldo, he does operate a lot in the box as a number 9, but he does also come out drifting. He likes to come to drift to the left, which is his old home. We know that he likes to go to that left wing and kind of join the dots in those positions. But, this heat map, just what it does show is that Ronaldo is not just a number 9. So he will be at times on the edge of the box where he might play 1-2s, bring other Bruno Fernandes in if Bruno's playing as a number 10, and you might pick up additional points that way through assisting. So I think that's what this heat map really, really shows. The other point I want to kind of add is if you don't go for Ronaldo, and I kind of mentioned them 2 minutes ago, was the Lukaku, Ferran Torres side of it. So if we can kind of look at that, Haider, what's your opinion on that at the moment with those two players?
Look, I I wasn't so hot on bringing Lukaku in straight away, not because I actually think he's going to finish as one of the highest scorers, but I just felt like, as of right now, I think it was, for me, more beneficial to go for the Bruno and Salah sort of double. I think right now, Ferran Torres, as you mentioned in preseason, is playing striker. Ferran Torres for 7.1 million he is now, I believe, or 7.2. He is probably the best value for money in the game. I think there's no doubt about it. And when you look at some of City's fixtures, and you're looking, Aguero's not here now. Obviously, Jesus has been playing out wide, which was a bit of a surprise, I think, for maybe not for you, but for the regular, sort of Premier League fan having a look at it. And I just think that right now, when I'm looking at Cristiano Ronaldo, and I'm the biggest Ronaldo fan there is, and my heart would say bring him in, but I just don't think that for value for money right now, he's the player that I'd be going for. I think Ferran Torres, as a midfielder as well, will get more points if he scores a goal. On Lukaku as well, he's £1 million cheaper as well. But again, I like my midfield options. I've gone for more, I would say that the cheaper options are striker. I think you've got Danny Ings who will get points. So I think he's in there for me. I think Antonio is going to get you points as well. I'd rather stock up and make sure my midfield is strong and I have someone like Luke Shaw in defense. So it's that balance, isn't it, at the moment? Ronaldo and Lukaku, I think everyone's going to go towards them. There's going to be weeks, Rob, where they're going to get 2 points here, a couple points here and there. They will score big goals, but I'm quite happy sticking with the more premium midfielders and then going for, until I see one of the strikers actually do score goals for a considerable length of time.
Always about balance, and I agree with you. And I agree with what you said there about Ferran Torres. I think Ferran Torres is the overwhelming budget pick in the whole of FPL at the moment, because he is going to be Manchester City's number 9 this season, and that means he's going to score goals. He might not play every game, but Manchester City as a differential have proved last season and beyond that even when you're on the bench, their players come off the bench and get 10 to 15 point hauls regularly. So there's no worry there as well. And you see that obviously with the 3 Man City players in my team, that's how I feel about Gundogan. Even if Gundogan doesn't start, I think he's going to be in a position to get points. But he is starting games. So that's the balance. Just my points on Lukaku. Lukaku is injured. So this is something that FPL players this week have to balance up. You made the salient point that he's £1 million cheaper than Ronaldo. So players have to decide if they've already bought him, whether you sell him now because he has actually got a thigh strain, and he's having a scan tomorrow. If that scan comes back as something a little bit more serious, what happens? He doesn't play. So you lose that. So he's going to be benched, and obviously you would lose those points hauls. I will probably sit on Lukaku until I know one way or the other. So I might make a very late substitution with him and take him out. I would ideally not want to do that. And if there's any chance that he'll play, even from the bench for Chelsea, I will stick with him this week because he could come on for the final 10 minutes and get 3 goals. That's just the way it goes. So that's the balancing point. I agree with you. Stick with midfielders who have form and consistency, as opposed to strikers that might have big hauls in individual weeks, but not necessarily do it week to week.
I think one of the key things as well, Rob, is that you actually have to look at where these players end up. One of my mistakes over the years has been something I was doing, during Liverpool's title-winning side was I was chopping between Salah and Mane, and really you probably should have both of them in that year. They were both unbelievable. But that was my problem. I was chopping and saying, okay, well, I'm going to take a punt on this player for a hot streak of 5 games, and I'll bring this one. And I know sometimes that works, but I was losing points consistently because I was dropping -8 here, -4 here. So really, across the sort of the average, I was probably not making as many points as I thought I was. But there is a question here. I mean, I do want to talk about my pick later, and they will be actually sort of 2 players. But question here from Sam saying, would you consider Kane at 12.3 for your team after the excellent goal in the qualifiers, especially since Son is flagged? Son is out, isn't he? I'm not sure how long he's out for, but Harry Kane looks like he's going to be hitting form. My only concern with Tottenham, Rob, is that I feel like I'm watching a carbon copy of Wolves under Nuno. They're not going to create a lot of chances. They're going to win games 1-0. And I just don't think that Kane's going to get as much service as he did the previous season. And surprisingly, I know he was under Jose Mourinho, but Harry Kane was dropping deep. I don't think Harry Kane is going to drop deep in that system.
I think if Harry Kane can score goals and get the assists that he got in Jose Mourinho's system, he will get that in Nuno's system because he's that good. So I think at 12.3 million, if he's fit, which we know he is, played for England, I think it's a little bit of a gimme. So I think that he is very much a rational choice ahead of maybe Ronaldo at the moment, just as it stands. That doesn't mean that in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks it's different. I think also for Harry Kane, there is a bit of a differential if Son's not on the pitch. So will he get that link-up play? So the extra assists, helping Son obviously in the final third. That's something that Kane's really good at. But Harry Kane scores goals, just scores goals. He gets points, he scores goals. And I just talked there about consistency, didn't I, with strikers? The one thing that Harry Kane is when he plays in general is consistent. He will get you 6 points every week with your eyes closed. He might even get you more than that if he's on a little bit of a run. We'll talk a little about Wolves as well in a minute. It's funny you kind of brought them up. I think they're really, really interesting for the next weeks coming up. There's a couple of teams that we'll focus on who have got really, really good game weeks coming. But Tottenham themselves have started really well. Their defenders have been kind of faultless. You look at the price range, a lot of them.
Eric Dyer and Davinson Sanchez, 2 players you probably wouldn't bring in. They're getting clean sheets.
And all of the players at the very, very top end of FPL are the top 1% in the 8 million players worldwide, all went for a little bit of a punt on Tottenham. And it's worked. So it's worked in the short term, and that's how you play this game. And sometimes you do, like you said there, 5 or 6 weeks, you might take a punt. If you chop and change too much and lose points for those punts, then that's an issue. But I don't think when you've got 5 defenders, if you've got Dyer or Tanganga in your team, or even go up to Reguilon at 5.2 million, they are all prudent buys that will give you returns, even if Tottenham are not really winning every week. Now, they are winning at the moment. They're at the right end of the table. But they are good value picks that will probably give you longer term returns than maybe some of the premiums that you just think will.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good segue, Rob, into Wolves. And I've got their fixtures up here. And we saw as Manchester United fans straight up how effective they were going forward. I mean, they were fantastic, and it's a completely different Wolves side. I think people need to not think about Wolves back on the Nuno. This is a completely different, more attacking, more expansive, higher intensity. They're a great watch, to be honest with you. There's a couple of players that I sort of thought were quite good. I thought Trincao was, obviously he missed a few chances against United, a decent option. But look, Wolves have got Watford, Brentford, Southampton, Newcastle. You could argue that looking at those teams, maybe all 4 of them could be relegation sort of threatened. Maybe Newcastle not, but especially Watford, Brentford, and Southampton. And, you're sort of having a look at, and there's a question here, Rob, saying about, defenders under 6 million who will get returns over the next 4 weeks. That's why I think now players should start looking at the defenders that are at Wolves. So I'm just going to pick out a few. Rob Cody, who's been very, very good. He's at 4.5 million. You have got Semedo as well, who was pretty poor under Nuno, but at 4.9. And we talk about these attacking fullbacks. What's working for you at the moment? You've got Cancelo and you've got Cresswell attacking fullbacks. I've got Luke Shaw, who's a good attacking fullback. And they're giving the returns, and that's what I usually look for in FPL. I mean, are there any other defenders that you're looking over at Wolves as well and thinking, you know what, I'm going to hedge my bets on them? You could even look at Traore. I mean, Traore, considering some of the options at 6 million, Rob, could be a really shrewd buy. I mean, I think one of the issues with Traore and for Wolves at the moment is it looks like Jimenez hasn't really hit the ground running yet. Obviously, with the injury, they can't really put the ball in the back of the net. But as soon as they do, Traore for 6 million could be a big differential.
Yeah, we need to talk Wolves metrics because obviously the points table says they've not done very well. They're at the wrong end of the table in the Premier League. But all of the metrics tell you that Wolves are doing very well. More shots than any other team in the Premier League. Why is that? They're kind of playing what I would call a faux system. It's not a real system. So they're kind of playing a 2-3-5. What does that mean? Well, it means that their fullbacks are basically playing as wingers. Their fullbacks are starting games, but they're pressing so high up the pitch, catching the ball in danger areas in the final third. And this is why Wolves are creating opportunities because they're so overloaded on the attack. So, 2-3-5 might not sound like a system, but that is actually what the average position is saying for Wolverhampton Wanderers at the moment. So you can tell they're attacking. On the flip side of it, defending, they've actually conceded less chances, even though they've lost games, than any team in the Premier League. So that also tells you that system, the 2-3-5, is working. They're not actually conceding opportunities. However, they've lost matches. So this is the week to buy Wolverhampton Wanderers. This is the week to kind of go in there. So on that question there about defenders under 6 million, the outstanding choice is Nelson Semedo, who's basically playing as a right winger at the moment. And yes, you talked about Jimenez there. Jimenez will have problems because he's called up for international duty for Brazil, which means he won't feature.
Isn't Jimenez for Mexico?
Sorry, Mexico. So the teams obviously in South America have got problems with coming back. So there is an issue about some players will play and some won't, but we don't know with Jimenez at the moment if he will, because that is just part of the issue here with South American teams. But he might. But I don't think that should kind of put you off Wolverhampton Wanderers about thinking about one player in the attack. I think you need to kind of look across the base. Now, did you say that you've got Wolves' next fixtures? What were they again, Haider? The next four?
You have got Brentford in there. You've got Southampton. You have Newcastle, and then the last one. Well, the next one is actually Watford. So you're looking at a nice run against some lower end teams.
So if Wolves had the metrics that they had in their opening matches against these next four, Wolves would probably be in the top 2 or 3 in the division. That's the truth. So I think they've got unlucky in some of those games, and luck is something you can't really measure in football. But you also make your own luck, don't you? So I think in terms of looking at the players that are playing well, Traore at 6 million, if you need someone as a kind of mid-range midfielder to kind of do a little bit of everything and get opportunities, there is every chance this year that the way Traore is being used, that he's not just going to get the odd assist now and then. He might be a player that actually gets double-digit goal returns because they are playing that system, allowing him to get in behind, and they're playing such a high system high up the pitch. So I think he's a big tip. But as I said, Nelson Semedo, I think naturally, 4.9 million with the average position that he plays for this team is going to get you returns. You might get clean sheets, which is the bonus here, but I think you're also going to get the assists because he's crossing the ball into the box. And once Jimenez really finds his feet in the weeks ahead, I think Semedo might be one of those kind of automatic picks that everyone has around 4.9 million. He's too much good value to not have him in your team, so you kind of get rid of the chaff out the team, like the Simicast and those kind of players, the players that kind of are not going to give you returns, even though they're really, really cheap. But anyone under 5 million, as I said here, our watcher here was kind of saying under 6, there's some real value in it this season. Brentford defenders, Brighton defenders, Wolves defenders, these teams who might not be traditionally favourites are going to give you returns. And that means you can go a little bit more premium.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And there's a comment actually here. Demarai Gray, that's a really good shout. He's been decent. Go on.
I didn't fancy Demarai Gray. When I looked at the metrics at the start of the season, I now going to sound really boring and put everyone to sleep. I looked at Demarai Gray. I liked what he did when he left Leicester. I think he was okay. But I looked at Benitez's system and I thought, it's not going to play. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. He'll be bench fodder. Anyway, what's happened? He's playing, he's scoring, he looks good. So I think, again, if you're an Everton fan, you might want to lean towards Demarai Gray. If I had to pick, as the comment there says, Gray or Traore, because of what we just said about Wolves, at the moment, Traore. But Gray should be one on your watch list. Keep an eye on him. It's all about value, isn't it? And it's not necessarily a player that you might start in every match, but if Everton have got a good matchup, and he's doing well and he's on form, as we saw last year with the West Ham players, when West Ham hit form and players didn't want to put Jesse Lingard in, but people were buying him for their bench because a bit of a romantic notion maybe for some Man United fans just to be able to buy a United player. And then suddenly he was the automatic pick. Gray could be like that, and so could Traore. They could be guys that get you really big returns for not really much outlay.
Absolutely. And Rob, I want to sort of talk about quickly touch on a goalkeeper, because obviously I have 2 goalkeepers out, and I'm looking at Sanchez from Brighton, and I'm having a look at his next 3 fixtures, and he has got Brentford, he's got Leicester, he's got Palace, and Arsenal. All sides, I mean, Leicester have struggled, let's be honest, they've had injuries, and you're looking at Crystal Palace as well. I think Palace are going to have a struggle this year under Patrick Vieira, and then Arsenal obviously are bottom of the table. Brighton have started well this year, and they're not conceding a lot of goals. I know a couple of years ago, or even the last year, they were conceding a lot of goals. But, Sanchez seems to emerge as a nice budget option for people looking at a goalkeeper.
A beautiful budget option, and I always advocate for people to play the 2 goalkeeper option. So I know lots of players that go premium, go and get an Alisson, an Edison, someone like that, and then they're quite happy to put a 4 million goalkeeper in there who never ever plays. And then you get those odd weeks where those premium goalkeepers don't play or actually have a bad week. Kind of rare, but I think it's better to have that option where you can kind of swap around. Brighton, for me, they're my outside tip in the Premier League this year to kind of finish in the top 10. And people are a bit like, oh, that's kind of crazy. When you watch them, they play football the right way. They really do. You know, Potter's got it nailed down after, a tough opening period. They're a team that might fight relegation. But the point is that when you look at their players all the way through, all their players get points because they perform well. They get those kind of performance points. And then they might not be the biggest scorers in the league, so I wouldn't kind of want to really look at their forwards. But I think Sanchez is a really, really easy option. I think he kind of still started at 4.5 million. He is my starting goalkeeper. I started him in my weeks in game week 1 and game week 2, and he let me down because Brighton conceded late goals. Schmeichel was my number 2 there. Schmeichel played for me last week. Go for Sanchez. Everyone should have Sanchez in their team, or at least one Brighton defender, because I think that they're a team that will improve as the season goes on.
Duffy's another one. Yeah, he's exactly. Obviously budget. He's scored as well for Republic of Ireland. Mm-hmm. Obviously my new home, and he's a bit of a hero here in Dublin. So Rob, I just want to sort of touch on my tip. So Haider's tip of the week, or what could be a differential. I've actually gone for 2 players. It's been a bit of a struggle for me to choose, but I mean they're quite obvious players as well, but I do think that when you're looking, we're talking about the Ronaldos of the world, we're talking about Mo Salah, but these 2 players have both scored, 2 and 3 goals each this season. So you've got Mason Greenwood at 7.7. I mean, you've got to say that he's probably in fantastic form. I'm having a look at Manchester United's, starting lineup with no Fred playing, and we'll talk about the Brazil issue at the end. And I'm thinking, right, is Paul Pogba going to drop back? Is Sancho going to go to the left? Ronaldo will start. Mason, for me, I think is 3 goals and 3. And I'm looking at that Man United attack. Who's the most attacking and threatening for me right now? It's Mason Greenwood. And you look at Liverpool now with Firmino unlikely to play as well with the whole Brazil issue as well. You're looking at him, 7.6. He's also a midfielder, so he is going to be getting the extra points if he scores. Liverpool look threatening. We're seeing Trent, who's getting forward a lot more, and he's getting numbers as well. And 2 goals and 3, I think, Jota is another pick. So you could go with either one of them. And when you're looking around for a really good, option to supplement your premium options, I think you can look no further than those 2 players.
They're good choices. And like you just said, they're midfielders that actually play as forwards. So I think Jota is actually ahead of Firmino in the conversation, even when Firmino is around. But there is obviously that thing that he is still the senior player and Jota is not. But Jota's shown in the Premier League that he can get numbers. So I agree with you now. I think the thing with Mason is that with Ronaldo coming to the football club, we need to see what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wants to do with that attack. You would expect Mason still to play lots of minutes and lots of games. I don't think he'll be impacted long term. But there might be a short-term issue if Ronaldo comes in and maybe there's this function of bringing in Cavani at the same time. Will Cavani and Ronaldo play together? Now, we would say as United fans, probably not, but that could happen. And who gets hurt because of that? Well, it could be someone like Mason Greenwood. So I think that's the only reason to kind of watch out for that. However, if you've got a more balanced pick across the midfield and you've got 5 midfielders that all play week to week, then you might have a lower budget option, like we just talked about Brighton. So you have someone like Basuma. Then for a week, if Mason doesn't play, or for whatever reason, you've got a Basuma, you can actually put a kind of more budget option in your team, and you're not ruining the balance far too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's so many options, Rob, that players actually have. I think for the first time in a long time, you can go premium, you can go a bit more budget option. There's a lot of quality premium options as well. So I think finding that balance, as we've said, sort of since the first episode, is really key. So let's finish off now, Rob, on the Brazil player issue and what is going on, because obviously Fred isn't playing, but Fred has actually been in Carrington training. You're obviously seeing there's, I think Richarlison, I haven't had a look into it. So, obviously you're going to shed some light on what's going on. Richarlison, I believe, can play. But you're looking at Fabinho can't play, Firmino can't play, Alisson can't play. That's 3 key players for Liverpool. So yeah, what is going on with this? It seems a little bit of a farce, if you ask me.
Let's look at it from an FPL standpoint. There's lots of kind of conjecture and politics around what's happening with these players. So what do you do? I think for a week, there's no issue benching them if they're part of your core setup. So, the likes of Fabinho are not really part of people's core setups on FPL. Firmino is an outside pick. Alisson might be an issue. Fred, how many people have got Fred in their team? Probably very few. But if they are part of your team, maybe sit on them for a week. We don't know what's going on with the South American question. There might be games where people get left out because of that, because of quarantine rules. So nothing really to panic about, but I certainly wouldn't be bringing any of those players in the next week or two. I'd be sitting on it and just waiting and seeing what goes on.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that, actually there are options where, I would have avoided pretty much all of them. I wouldn't be bringing many of them in. So, Rob, look, we're going to wrap up now, but what's your final word, on this game week? I think it's centering around the sort of the wild card. Would you be advising on that?
Wait and see. If you're in that area of FPL where you're kind of outside the top 1 or 2 million and you're getting the jitters, and getting the jitters is pretty normal at this time of the season, just wait for 2 weeks maybe to see what Ronaldo does, to see what Lukaku does, to see what the premiums do. And you still then will get in 2 or 3 weeks mid-range players who start to perform more. And you might see that within, say, a month, that Ferran Torres, who we're saying is kind of the outstanding option in that price range, might be just essential, that you cannot not have a team without him. He might be the guy that you pair up with Salah this year rather than Mane, because Mane is obviously always going to be premium. I've done the Salah Mane double up for a couple of years, and that's huge returns with that, even when they're not playing well. But this year, you are looking for that mid-level. Torres could be the player of the season for FPL for me. He might not be the top scorer. You still might find that Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes and those kind of outperform him. But when you look at that big slice of money that you pay for those extra premiums, he might be very close to their totals at the end of the season. Wait 2 or 3 weeks. Don't use your wild card yet.
Well said, Rob. And guys, look, thanks for all your questions. Some fantastic questions. And it's really great to see people engaging with the content. Make sure you do hit the like and subscribe button. Share this with your friends as well. We're going to be back, and you'll be able to see if you can beat myself and Rob. I'm very low, but obviously Rob is angling towards getting towards the top. So thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.